I had always known that my stepsister, Vanessa, was embarrassed by me. She never said it directly when we were children, but her little comments, her eye rolls, and the way she introduced me to her friends told me everything I needed to know. She was the glamorous one. She had expensive clothes, a beautiful apartment, a successful career, and a social circle filled with people who seemed to measure everyone by their job title, bank account, and appearance. And then there was me. I was a nurse. I worked long shifts, came home exhausted, and sometimes fell asleep on the couch without even changing out of my scrubs. I didn't drive an expensive car. I didn't own designer handbags, but I loved my job because every day I had the chance to make someone's worst day a little easier. Vanessa never understood that. For years, she called my profession just nursing. So when her wedding invitation arrived, I almost didn't go, but my mother convinced me. "She's your sister," Mom said gently. "Whatever happened between you two, this is her wedding, be there for her." So I bought a simple navy dress, wrapped Vanessa's gift, and went. The wedding was held at one of the most luxurious hotels in the city. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, hundreds of flowers covered the tables. Waiters moved through the room carrying glasses of champagne, and every guest seemed dressed as if they were attending a celebrity event. I immediately felt out of place. Vanessa, however, looked like she belonged there. Her wedding gown was breathtaking. She stood beside her wealthy fiancé, Daniel, smiling for photographers, while everyone praised how perfect they looked together. I stayed near my mother, then Vanessa spotted me. She walked over with Daniel and two of her friends. "You're wearing that?" she asked. Looking me up and down, I smiled awkwardly. "It's nice to see you too." One of her friends asked, "So what do you do again?" Before I could answer, Vanessa laughed. "She's just a nurse," the women laughed politely. I felt my face burn. I could have defended myself. I could have reminded Vanessa that I had worked through countless night shifts, held the hands of dying patients, comforted frightened families, and spent years studying and training for my profession. Instead, I simply smiled. "Yes," I said. "I'm a nurse." Vanessa shrugged anyway. "I have important guests to greet."
She walked away. My mother looked at me sadly.
"Don't let her ruin your evening." "I won't," I promised. I didn't know then that the biggest moment of the entire wedding was still ahead. About an hour later, everyone was seated for dinner. Daniel's father, Richard, stood to give a speech. He was a respected businessman, the kind of man people immediately noticed when he entered a room. He was older, confident, and surrounded by people eager to speak with him. He began talking about Daniel's childhood and how proud he was of his son. Then he mentioned something unexpected. Before I finished, Richard said, "There is someone in this room I need to thank." He looked across the tables. His eyes suddenly stopped on me. I froze. Richard stared at me for several seconds. Then his expression changed completely. He walked away from the microphone. He came directly toward me. My heart started racing when he reached my table. He looked at me carefully. "Excuse me," he said. "Are you Emma?" I nodded slowly. "Yes." His eyes widened. I knew it. Everyone around us became silent. Richard turned toward Daniel's son. "Do you know who this woman is?" Daniel looked confused. "That's Vanessa's stepsister." Richard looked back at me. Then he said something that changed the entire atmosphere of the wedding. "She's the nurse who saved my life." The room went completely quiet. Vanessa's smile disappeared. Daniel stared at his father. Richard took a breath. 3 years ago, I had a massive cardiac emergency while traveling. I collapsed in the hospital. My heart stopped twice. He pointed toward me. She was there. I suddenly remembered him. It had been years, but I recognized his face. He had arrived unconscious after collapsing in the emergency department. I had been part of the team caring for him that night. "I remember you," I said quietly. Richard smiled. "You should. You refused to leave my side." He explained that his condition had deteriorated suddenly, while doctors worked to stabilize him. I had stayed nearby monitoring his condition, speaking with his terrified family and helping coordinate the emergency response. "You were the one who noticed something had changed before anyone else." Richard said you called the doctor immediately. You helped save my life. I shook my head. It wasn't just me, it was the whole team. Richard smiled. That's what you told me then, too. Then he turned toward the entire room. This woman never asked for recognition. She never asked my family for money. She didn't even know who I was. His voice became emotional. She was simply doing her job. Vanessa stood frozen beside Daniel. Richard looked at her and you called her just a nurse. Nobody laughed this time. Vanessa's face turned red. Richard continued, there is nothing just about saving someone's life. The room erupted in applause. I felt tears forming in my eyes. For the first time that evening, I didn't feel embarrassed. I felt proud. Daniel walked toward me. I had no idea, he said. That's okay, I replied. He looked at Vanessa. Did you know? Vanessa didn't answer. Her silence said everything. Richard then told everyone something else. After his recovery, he had tried to find the nurse who had cared for him. He had sent letters to the hospital hoping to thank her. But I never got the chance, he said, until that night. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small envelope. I've carried this for years. He handed it to me. Inside was a handwritten letter and a generous donation to the hospital's nursing education program. Made in my honor. I couldn't believe it. You didn't have to do this. I wanted to, he replied. People like you deserve to know that your work matters. Vanessa finally approached me. For a moment, I expected another insult. Instead, she whispered, I'm sorry. I looked at her. She looked completely different now. The confidence was gone. The arrogance had disappeared. I shouldn't have called you just a nurse, she said. I took a breath. You shouldn't have called me that because there is no just in front of nurse. She nodded. I know. Daniel stepped beside her. My father has talked about that nurse for years. He said I never imagined it would be you. I smiled. Life has funny ways of bringing people together. The wedding continued, but something had changed. People who had ignored me earlier suddenly wanted to talk to me. Some asked about my work, others thanked me for what nurses do. But strangely, none of that mattered as much as what happened next. Richard came over privately. I hope you don't mind me saying this. He said your sister may have underestimated you, but never do that yourself. Those words stayed with me because for years, I had allowed Vanessa's opinion to affect how I saw myself. I had started believing that because I wasn't wealthy, glamorous, or powerful, I wasn't important. That night taught me something I should have known all along. Your worth isn't determined by the people who fail to recognize it. Sometimes the people who call you ordinary simply haven't understood what extraordinary looks like. Months later, Vanessa apologized again. Our relationship didn't magically become perfect. There were years of hurt between us, and one apology couldn't erase everything. But she began treating me differently. She stopped making jokes about my job. She started asking about my patients. And one afternoon she told me something I never expected to hear. I'm proud of you, I smiled. Thank you, she looked at me and laughed softly. You know what's funny? I spent years thinking I was the successful one. And now, she shook her head. Now I realize success isn't always what people see. I hugged her not because the past didn't matter, but because I had finally stopped carrying it. I went back to work the following Monday. The hospital was busy as usual. Phones rang. Patients needed help. Doctors rushed through hallways. Nurses moved from room to room. Nobody there knew what had happened at that wedding. Nobody cared that a wealthy businessman had recognized me. And honestly, I didn't need them to because I already knew who I was. I wasn't just a nurse. I was someone who had chosen a difficult profession because I believed people's lives mattered. I was someone who had held strangers' hands when they were afraid. Someone who had comforted families when words failed. Someone who had stayed awake through long nights because another human being needed care. And that was enough. The wedding taught me a lesson I would never forget. Never let someone else's limited view of you become the limit of your own self-worth. Sometimes, the person standing quietly in the corner is carrying more courage, kindness, and strength than everyone else in the room combined. And sometimes all it takes is one person who knows the truth to remind everyone else that night. The groom's father didn't just recognize a nurse, he recognized the woman who had once helped save his life. And finally, my stepsister recognized me too.